Committee Room 29.
Okay, members, you're all very welcome to today's meeting. In the room with me today, I have Anya Murphy, Andy Allen and Paul Frew. And on Starleaf, we have Mark Durkin. Can I, before we start, ask members if they have any declaration of interest at this stage? No declaration of interest, then I'll go to apologies. We have an apology from Kelly Armstrong, Stephen Dunn and Fran McCann. I'll move on then to agenda item 2, which is chairperson's business. Members, before we start any business, I'd firstly like to pass on our sincere condolences from this committee to Kelly Armstrong and her family circle on the recent loss of her brother. So I'm sure all members would be thinking of Kelly at this time. Members, again this week we have some committee membership news. Alex Easton and Pam Cameron have now left the committee, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank both of them and wish them well with whatever committees they go on to now. Pam unfortunately had a very short time on this committee, but Alex was with us since September 2020, and I'd particularly like to thank him for all his work. I know he had a keen interest on the insulation side of our homes, and he also had a keen interest in the model engineers Society, so thank Alex for that. Members, are we agreed that we write a letter of thanks to Alex and Pam? Agreed? Okay, members, I'd now like to welcome our new members, Paul Frew and Stephen Dunn. He's joined the committee at a busy time, so we're very glad to have you on it. Paul, you have a wealth of experience. You've been in the Assembly a long time, so you're very welcome. Stephen unfortunately can't be here today. He had a prior engagement before the committee moves. Also, members, at this point, I'd like to wish one of our committee team all the very best. Oliver is leaving us to move over to agriculture. Sean's waving by there in the corner. Oliver, I want to thank you for just for all of those faces you pull at me during committee and things like that. You know, you've been so good humoured, and you've been a great committee member to have with us. So all the very best for whatever lies ahead for you as well. Okay, members, I would just also like to highlight the event that Engagement has highlighted to us. You received an email yesterday regarding Gambling with Lives and the launch of their education pilot programme on the 28th of September in the Lawn Gallery at 11:45. Members, are they content to note that? And if members wish to attend that, they can respond individually, yes? Okay, we'll then move on to agenda item 3, draft minutes. Members, you'll find the minutes from the 16th of September 2021 at page 7. Are members content to agree the minutes as drafted? Can I hear a noise? Agreed? Agreed. Good, okay. Can we move on then to agenda item 4, which is matters arising. Members, last week we had a briefing from TWN, and on the back of that we requested an urgent briefing to take place this week from the Department on the WICT programme. Due to annual leave of the relevant officials, that briefing will now take place next week. Are members content to note that? Content? Yeah, okay. Members, you've also been provided a page 18 with departmental correspondence in relation to the review of welfare mitigations. The letter states that the challenges faced in responding to the pandemic have resulted in an unavoidable delay in moving forward with the review of welfare mitigation package. Minister Hargey has decided that the review should be taken forward by an independent advisory panel to complete a review of existing welfare mitigation measures and to identify the need for a future welfare mitigation package. It is anticipated that the advisory panel will begin their work on the week commencing the 4th of October 2021, with the review to be completed and the final report produced by February 2022. The panel will be expected to produce a report detailing their recommendations for consideration by the Executive. Members, just any comments or content to note? I suppose only one comment I would have, that it's been described as an advisory panel and not an independent panel, which I know is probably just being a little bit picky there, but other than that, members, any comments or content to note? Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, let me back you up on your pickiness, Chair. They explain how they're going to go forward and the route map they have set out before us, but I'm getting very concerned and uncomfortable with regards to this default sentence that we see in letters now, whereby regrettably over the past 18 months the challenges faced in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in an unavoidable delay in moving forward. I hear that a lot, it's creeping in, and that sentence in itself is not good enough. That's the why they're delayed. We don't know how. What I would expect to see from here on in is what details can they give about the delays. Did it mean that people had to be moved about in the department? Was their priorities changed? Were people not being able to congregate together in order to move things forward? This is the level of detail I would expect when we talk about delays. I know we're looking backwards, but I think it will give the committee a greater understanding about the problems that the department has faced over the last 18 months.
Okay, thank you.
I expect to see detail instead of that default sentence every time there have been delays.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I've got Andy then on you. Andy.
Yeah, Chair, can we follow up this letter and ask for the terms of reference the department have set out for this review?
Okay, absolutely can do that. Anya?
Could we write to the department just asking exactly where this legislation is at the minute and why there has been a delay on it?
Yeah, we've done that in the past previously, but we can certainly write to them again. That's not a problem. Anybody else want to say anything? Mark Durkin, sorry Mark, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Just welcome some sort of clarity at last on this, and while undoubtedly COVID will have caused delays, the last 18 months has also seen a lot of destitution, and should, if anything, been, I don't know, given the department more of a rocket to get this done quicker, rather than put it on the long finger or allow it to be delayed, given the importance of this issue.
No, you're quite right, and I know as members of this committee, anybody who's been on the committee will know that we've been asking for this review since the committee was reinstated back in January last year, and it is quite disappointing that it's only being announced now, the review, and that we'll really not be able to do an awful lot about this. Should there be flagged up anything that needs to be changed before the end of the mandate? So I do think it is. I think Anya's right. I think we need to know exactly why the review has taken so long to be brought forward. Members, are you happy we move on? Yeah? Okay. You've been provided a page 20 with the departmental correspondence in relation to the PIP assessment services contract with Capita. The department would like to offer the committee a presentation from departmental officials along with Capita's senior team in order to update them in relation to ongoing and planned future improvements to the delivery of the PIP assessment service. Members, have you any comments on that? Are you content to schedule the presentation? Just bearing in mind we're hearing from NIPSO later in the meeting regarding the findings of its own initiative investigation into the role of evidence in the administration of PIP. Any comments or content that we schedule that meeting? Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, most content, Chair, and I know they'll provide a written submission, but just in advance of that, if we can impress upon the department if they can outline all of the improvements that have been made to the delivery of the PIP service.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody else are happy to move on? Okay. Then, members, you've been provided in your tabled papers with a departmental response in relation to committee queries relating to preparations for the arrival of Afghan refugees. Again, members, any comments or content to note? Content? Mark, your hand's still up. I don't know if you want to come in. Go ahead. No.
Sorry, Chair, it was a delayed reaction. It was more on the PIP assessment.
No, that's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Briefing. Yeah, I think it's important that we get as much information prior to the oral briefing as possible, and I'd be particularly interested in finding out what efforts were made to see how another contract could have been done. Was this just an automatic renewal of Capita's contract? Because we knew it was coming, and questions were being raised by committee members for a year before the contract was renewed. So again, it's a bit like the point that Paul Frew made there at the start of the meeting, rather than just saying, oh, COVID caused delays. How exactly did the pandemics and the awful situations that have come with it, how exactly did it encumber the department's ability to go out to tender for a new contract?
Okay, no, thanks for that, Mark. Any other comments? Okay, members, we're going to then move on to, we're going to make a jump up to agenda item 11 because we are going to lose a quorum during the meeting. So can I ask you to turn to agenda item 11, which is SL1, the Social Security Amendment EU Exit Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find this at page 419 of your pack. The proposed rule will amend the Social Security Immigration and Asylum Consequential Amendments Regulations Northern Ireland 2000 to ensure that they operate in line with the new immigration system and to take account of the fact that EU association agreements no longer apply to the UK after EU Brexit. Members, any comments? Are you content for the Department to proceed to make the rule? Content? Yes? Need to hear you?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Then the SL1, the Social Security Habitual Residence and Past Presence.
Chair.
Oh, hold on.
Mark has a...
Mark, sorry, go ahead.
It's just on that, Chair. I think we could do maybe with a wee briefing on that to find out the actual implications for people here. You know, we've come across a few cases through constituency work where people are being left high and dry as a result of the current situation. And I just want to know what this will do to protect them, or if it will even.
Okay, no problem, Mark. So would you rather, are we not then going to allow the Department to proceed and wait on that briefing? Or are you happy for them to proceed and receive the briefing? It's up to yourself, Mark.
Well, I'd rather get the briefing, or unless I can just record my concerns about this now, because I will be bringing them to the Assembly.
Okay, well then sure, we'll get the briefing. Is there a rush on this, do we know? Or are we okay to get a briefing on this hopefully next week? Yeah? Okay. We'll get a briefing then first on that. And then can we move on to SL1, the Social Security Habitual Residence and Past Presence Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021. You find a copy of this urgent SL1. It was received in your table papers. Following the change in regime in Afghanistan, the Home Office has established 2 resettlement routes for Afghan nationals, the Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy and the Afghanistan Citizens Resettlement Scheme. There is currently another scheme in operation which is due to end in 2022, the Afghanistan Locally Employed Staff Ex Gratia Scheme. The proposed rule will ensure that anyone arriving here under one of these schemes is exempt from the habitual residence and past presence tests and may be entitled to certain social security benefits from their arrival. Members, are any comments, or are you content that the Department proceed to make this urgently required rule? Yep, okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to agenda item 12, which is SR 2021-242, the Private Tenancies Coronavirus Modifications Number 2 Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find a copy of this rule at page 426. Members, have you any objections to the rule? No objections? No? Okay. Then I'll put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-242, the Private Tenancies Coronavirus Modifications Number 2 Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and has no objection to the rule. Moving then on to agenda item 13, which is SR 2021-243, the Pensions Regulator Information Gathering Powers and Modification Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. Members, you'll find a copy of this rule at page 434. Again, can I ask members, have you any objection to the rule? No objections? Now I'll put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-243, the Pensions Regulator Information Gathering Powers and Modification Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and has no objection to the rule. Moving on then to agenda item 14, which is SR 2021-244, the Occupational Pension Schemes, Climate Change Governance and Reporting Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find this at page 444. Again, can I ask members, have you any objections to this rule? No objections. Anya, I'm glad you're here. I'll then put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-244, the Occupational Pension Schemes, Climate Change, Governance and Reporting Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021, and has no objections to the rule. Moving swiftly on then to agenda item 15, which is SR 2021-246, the Occupational Pension Schemes, Climate Change, Governance and Reporting Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Regulations NI 2021. Members should find a copy of this this rule at page 544 of your pack. Members, any objections to the rule? Relying on you, Anya, again. I'll put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-246, Occupational Pension Schemes, Climate Change Governance and Reporting, Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment, Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and has no objections to the rule. We'll then move on to agenda item 16, which is SR 2021-248, the Housing Benefit and Universal Credit Sanctuary Schemes Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find this rule at page 591. Again, members, have you any objections to the rule? No. Okay. I'll then put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-248, the Housing Benefit and Universal Credit Sanctuary Schemes Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and has no objections to the rule. Okay, one more to go. You'll find this at agenda item 17, which is SR 2021-249, the Universal Credit Childcare Costs Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. Members, you'll find a copy of this rule at page 602 of your meeting packs. Can I ask members, have you any objections to the rule? Somebody tell me? No? Okay. Then I'll put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-249, the Universal Credit Childcare Costs Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and has no objection to the rule.
Excuse me, Chair, apologies. We normally add a line there to say subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, and it just was omitted from your brief today.
Okay, members heard that. I forgot about that, so I did.
All those SRs are
Is that Sean's fault?
No. Sean was away. Sean was away on training.
Okay, members, we will then move back again to agenda item 5, then, which is the Private Tenancies Bill. Isn't that correct? Yes? Okay. Members, we have a number of items of business to deal with today in relation to this bill. Firstly, members, regarding scheduling oral evidence sessions on the bill. You've been provided at page 22 with a list of potential stakeholders on the bill that could be invited in to give oral briefings. The number of organisations we have requested to give oral briefings will impact on the length of the committee stage. The clerk will consider the timings after today's meetings once the initial list is agreed, and the need for an extension to the 30-day committee stage. Can I ask members to quickly go through these one by one and identify any key groups, as we may not have time to hear from all of these groups? So you'll see there on the list, the first one we have down here is housing rights. So what do members think there about housing rights coming in? I think that would be essential. Yeah? Yeah, okay. It could end up that all of them that we think are essential coming in. That's perfectly acceptable. Next one is the Chartered Institute of Housing. NI, again, another charity that I think would, certainly we would benefit from hearing what they have to say. Members agreed? Yeah? Okay, then number 2, we're looking at landlords. So we have the Landlords Association for Northern Ireland, and we have with the Landlords Association for Northern Ireland and letting agents, is that correct? Yeah.
Association of Residential Letting Agents. There's no specific representative body for letting agents in Northern Ireland, but there is an Association of Residential Letting Agents, which is like a GB-based body.
Okay, I mean, I do think it's important we hear from landlords as well on this. So I think we're going to have all of these people coming in. Yeah, members, any comments on that, or we'll just carry on with this? If we go then, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Can I ask, has any work been done to scope out the average amount of verbal evidence sessions that usually would come with a bill? I know that's a very open, because bills come with all shapes and sizes, but is there a norm in this? With regards to standards of time and trying to get everybody in, quality of evidence given, the amount of information we take in with regards to the amount of written verbal evidence we get. Is there a norm?
I don't think there is. I know our last bill was the licensing bill that we took a heck of a lot of evidence gathering on it, because it was I suppose a bit of a landmark bill as well. And it's the same with our Charities Bill. Will be the same. Like, it's only 3 clauses, but it's going to take a heck of a lot of evidence gathering in it. So I mean, and you'll know that, Paul, that it doesn't matter how many clauses are in a bill. Every bill is different. So Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, and just to echo, Chair, obviously given the impact that this legislation potentially can have, it's important to hear from a broad range of stakeholders. I know we're pressing towards the end of the mandate, but I'd much rather hear from as many voices as we possibly can to make sure we get it right than exclude anybody potentially. I know that's not what you're suggesting, Paul. And just very quickly, it remiss of me to declare an interest in relation to this and the next item of business in the charities as well.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Mark, you want to come in?
I'm raising my hand early because I seem to be too late at doing it otherwise. It's just as we're going through that, of course it's important that we hear from landlords, but also from tenants. And I've just had a scan down the list. I didn't see the inclusion of a group as the tenant's voice. I think it's a point someone had raised during the debate in the Assembly. It might have been Kelly actually.
I think it's renter's voice.
Yeah, renter's voice.
That could be it, sorry.
Yeah, no, well then we can look at that as well. I'll move on then to number 3, which is the tenancy deposit scheme administrators. Members happy enough for them to come in and brief us as well? Yep. Okay, that was all. I mean, that went through. Yep, that was this committee some years ago that one went through. Number 4 is energy efficiency, which is clause 9. So we'll ask in the Northern Ireland Housing Executive and Fuel Poverty Coalition NI and the Department for the Economy. Yeah, members happy enough with that? Yeah, okay, moving on to 5, electrical safety. I know that electrical safety, I know we've been contacted as members for meetings to do with this. So electrical safety first, members agreed that they come in and brief us? Yeah? Okay, number 6, fire, smoke and carbon monoxide. So we could then ask the NI Fire and Rescue Service on that. Okay, number 7 then, local government. So again, Solace, we could ask them. I know it says here it might be worth hearing from environmental health officers themselves, which probably would be probably a better idea than hearing from Solace directly, but we'll see how that one goes. I suppose if we write to the councils and ask, or write to Solace and ask that. Number 8 then is the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. We know we had them in, was it last week they were in briefing us? So it'd be good to get them back on this specific issue. And then, okay, what's this? Janice rescheduled briefings?
This other section is probably where you could maybe agree to perhaps take some written briefings if you wish. In June, the committee meeting had to end early on 17th of June, and we have to reschedule potentially those 3 organisations: Council for the Homelessness Co-Ownership, National Insulation Association. Each had their own issues to bring before committee. They have obviously some interests potentially in this bill, which is why I popped them on that list. But
well, I know the National Insulation one would probably fit in very well with the energy efficiency. So it would, and I know we did do a motion on that, wasn't it? Not we, but there was a motion on that back in the end of was it June time or so, May, June. So they might be worth getting in under that, and also Council for the Homeless as well. Sorry, Mark, you want in again?
No, it was just again a suggestion for someone else or other groups to add, and that would be student representative bodies, be it unions or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good idea, given actually the problems they're having at the moment. So yeah, that's another good idea. Members, I mean, we can, just to say, I mean, we can make this list as long as we want or as short as we want. I think it will very much be dependent on the amount of responses we get back as well.
I mean, just based on Paul's point, Chair, we obviously have only a limited time frame, and next week I'll be bringing motions for you to consider to extend both this bill and the gambling bill, and there will be specific end dates that we will have to focus on in order for it to have the bill to have any hope of getting through all its stages in the chamber, after our committee stage. So there potentially is a balance to be struck. But all we can do is take the list away and work with the dates that we have and see how what we can fit in, and if we need to take maybe an informal stakeholder event as well, potentially with tenants or or student, you know, union officials.
Yeah, I mean, we have the issue with our committee being on a Thursday that we have to finish at a certain time. We can't run it over past a certain time. And if the Assembly is recalled for a COVID committee on a Thursday or recalled at any stage on a Thursday, it's our committee that suffers because this is the Starleaf that's used. So it really is, our backs are against the wall more than any other committee because of that reason. So we just have to be mindful of the amount of work that we do have ahead. But I think that we just revisit this as we go along, and if it does come to a stage where we find that we don't have time, then we may have to look at, I mean, certainly written submissions will be going into the final report anyway on any of our bills. So whatever anybody has to say, if we can't have them in to do an oral submission, certainly their written submission will be part of our evidence gathering and part of our final remarks. So members happy enough that we move on from that? Or Mark, go ahead.
Can I come in on that?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's important that we perform our role in scrutinising and supporting the Minister trying to get legislation through, but I mean, we have to perform our role properly, and that means scrutinise properly. If it looks like one bill or another, or more than one bill, mightn't make it through by virtue of us trying to do our job properly, that's not really our problem. Genuinely, I mean, there have been delays, yes, we've heard about them again today, due to COVID. We also weren't here for 3 years. That caused quite a lot of delay, but we're much better doing our job properly than cutting corners and ending up with legislation that isn't fit for purpose.
No, I agree 100%, Mark. And I mean, if we can do whatever we can as a committee, whether that is having, if we are able to do it, any extra meetings. I know we're starting at 9 o'clock. We'll probably be starting at 9 o'clock now for the foreseeable future. So we will, and I know that causes issues as well with those who have childcare responsibilities. But we will do our very best, and I know we have always done that. And I think you're quite right, Mark. I mean, a lot of these bills are coming to us now at the 11th hour, and we're not going to rush them. We're going to do our job properly and effectively. So I'm happy. You know, we'll play it by ear as we go on. If we can get extra committee time, we'll do it. Mark, do you want to come in again?
Yeah, or might it be a case of the department having to prioritise or reprioritise and ensure that the legislation that we do scrutinise and that they are determined to get through by the end of this mandate is the legislation that will be most important when it comes to protecting people or transforming lives.
And also we've got to remember as well that we're going to have the social strategies as well, all being well with us, before the end of this year. So that will be, added work put onto the committee as well. So just worth bearing all of this in mind, folks. And with that, I'm going to move on because we've got lots to get on with today. So we have. So, okay, where are we here, Janice, on this? Okay, are members content to agree the questions, or have they any suggested changes or additions? You'll find that as well in your committee pack. So it's just so that we can then put out the call for evidence. Members agreed with the questions? Yep. Okay, then I propose then that the committee team work with engagement to get this out as soon as possible, and that we set a closing date for our call for evidence of Friday the 29th of October. We will commence taking evidence from key organisations on our list or stakeholders in advance of that date. So members happy enough with that? We move on? Yeah? Go ahead, Andy.
Just very quickly, as an aside, not specifically in relation to this, but this will be obviously 3 bills that we'll have come next week. And I know I raised previously about what other legislation the Minister hopes to bring forward, but if we can get more clarity on that, because I'm concerned that there may be 1 or 2 other pieces of legislation that the Minister wants to bring forward, and will we really as a committee have the time to properly scrutinise that?
Okay, we can ask that question, certainly, absolutely. Okay, members, anything else before we move on anything to do with those issues raised? Anya?
Just in terms of my point at the very start, Chair, the request to write to the department was in relation to the extension of the mitigation legislation, and it was just in relation to the delay of that.
Oh, not in the
Yeah,
review that we're talking about? Okay. No, well, I agree with that as well, because I think it's all part and parcel of the one thing as to why it was held up.
Yeah, just to get an update on where it is currently at and why there has been previous delays with it.
We have a letter with TEO Chair, don't we, on that from a couple of weeks ago?
I
We haven't
think
got
we
a
do,
response
yes.
back.
Sean's nodding his head. We do have a letter that's already, yeah. But we'll see what that is.
It's with the DFM now
Yeah.
to bring forward. It's not our department. Minister has highlighted that she's done everything she can possible.
Yeah, and I know I asked the question at question time last week. Do you ask the TEO or do you ask OFM, DFM that they bring this forward at the earliest opportunity? They can't wait any longer. So that's right, it is with them now. It's not with the Minister. Okay, members, are we happy to move on? Right, we're going to go to agenda item 6, which is a briefing by NICVA on the Charities Bill. Members have been provided with a copy of the NICVA briefing paper at page 37 of your packs. Can I then welcome Denise Copeland to the meeting? Denise, you're very welcome. If you would like to go ahead and brief the committee.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. NICVA is grateful to the committee for the opportunity to provide a briefing on the draft bill, and I will take you through our position on this bill. Clause 1. We agree that it is important that certain previous decisions made by Commission staff are rendered lawful. However, we would now question the list of relevant actions that have been excluded, in particular Clause 15C, where the Commission may have provided evidence to other public bodies, for example PSNI. We recognise that it was not necessarily the decision that Commission staff made which was unlawful, but rather that they didn't have lawful delegated authority to make these decisions on behalf of the Commission. Many charities will be pleased that they do not have to go through the charity registration process again and will be relieved to know the previous consents obtained, such as permission to change charitable purposes and schemes, will be lawful when this bill receives royal assent. We welcome that fresh appeal rights are included in the bill for those that want to challenge the lawfulness of a decision rendered lawful by the bill. However, 42 days is too short a time in which to make an appeal. We also believe that the 42 days in which charities currently have to make an appeal to the Commission, which is known as a decision review, is too short and should be extended. Charities may also appeal to the Charities Tribunal within 42 days, but the problem with this is that it runs concurrently with the 42 days in which they are permitted to appeal their decision to the Commission. Charities should be given a longer time in which to gather evidence in support of their appeal. It should be 3 months or longer. We would like to see time periods extended so that a charity could make an appeal to the Charity Tribunal after they have received the outcome of the decision reviewed by the Commission. Clause 2. It is important that Charity Commission staff should be able to make certain decisions on their own to ensure that charities are able to receive decisions in a timely manner. Certain decisions, however, which could negatively impact on the reputation of a trustee or a charity should not be taken by staff as identified. NICVA believes that this bill provides clarity on the future delegation of decision-making powers to Commission staff, including those which cannot be delegated, but now questions if it is necessary to put the detail of the scheme in primary legislation. It perhaps would make more sense to require a scheme, but leave the detail of the scheme in the hands of the Commissioners. Clause 3. NICVA welcomes that this bill includes the power to introduce a de minimis threshold for charity registration at some future point through regulations. We welcome also that a charity that falls below any set threshold will be able to remove itself from the charity register. And we agree that any charity not required to register should be permitted to do so if they want to be registered, if they want to be a registered charity without any prejudice against them. Without a de minimis threshold, there is a real danger that existing small organisations are going to wind up rather than having to register and or report annually to the Charity Commission. Trustees of smaller organisations have told us that they find the regulations overwhelming. Very small organisations do not have the benefit of staff to help them, and many of the small charities that have been in default on the register have older trustees who sometimes find the process of reporting online quite daunting and sometimes difficult. It is also discouraging new organisations from forming, as the charity registration and reporting regime is not always welcomed by those small organisations that simply don't identify with being a charity. So can a voluntary organisation choose not to be a charity in Northern Ireland? Well, it's not easy for voluntary organisations in Northern Ireland not to be a charity, as our definition of charity is not dependent on charity registration, as it is in Scotland. If a constituted voluntary organisation meets the definition of charity, that is, if it is set up for a purpose which falls under the 12 charitable purposes listed in the 2008 Act, and it is for the public benefit, then it is a charity, and therefore must register with the Commission. In contrast, a voluntary organisation with charitable purposes in Scotland is not required to register with the regulator unless they wanted to represent themselves as a charity. If we take by way of an example a small environmental group with a constitution that outlines its purpose to be the advancement of environmental protection for the benefit of the local community in which it's situated, it will be required to register with the Commission, even though it does not believe that it is a charity and it doesn't want any of the benefits of being a charity. There are many small groups like this that never intended to be a charity. Our definition of charity, however, says that they are. So is there indeed any benefit to society of making small organisations register with the Charity Commission? Well, we believe that there is an illusion that charity registration equals compliance with charity regulation, and that the Charity Commission ensures that all registered charities are fully compliant. The Charity Commission does not, however, review all of the accounts and reports submitted. It simply does not have the resources and is unlikely to ever have the resources to do this. If we take the last business year when the Commission was permitted to check accounts and reports, it was only able to check 19% of all sets of accounts and reports submitted to the Commission. In the year before that it was 12%, and in the previous year to that it was 53%. While these figures clearly demonstrate a resourcing issue in the Commission, they could also tell us that the Commission is unlikely to assign its limited resources to checking the accounts and reports of very small income charities, as these are low risk in terms of their income, unless they were simply chosen at random. Many of the charities that were in default on the register were very small charities with a low income and who didn't understand why they had to be charities in the first place. We worked on a specific project to help these charities file their accounts and reports, and encountered trustees who were frustrated, who were stressed, and sometimes very distressed at the requirements placed on them. We noticed with some that once we got them right on the register, it wasn't long before they were in default again. We could see that there is no benefit in having small organisations such as these being forced to register. If a de minimis threshold is not going to be introduced, then we need to change our definition of charity to that as is in Scotland. And finally, NICVA welcomes the plans to introduce proportionate regulation for small exempt charities if the de minimis threshold does go ahead, so that they may not have to file accounts and reports, and believe that this should be extended to small registered charities to ease the burden on them also. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, very much for that. If I just then go back to the beginning of your, hold on, I was reading as you were going along there. If I go back to the beginning, you'd put there about under your concerns that the definition of charity in Northern Ireland is not fully understood. Could you just give a wee bit more information on that? Just expand on that a bit.
Well, the fact that if we an organisation which meets the definition of charity in the 2008 Charities Act is a charity, so you don't have to be, the registration process just confirms that you're a charity. The registration process here does not make you a charity, and we think that there's a misunderstanding about that there, that people think that you're a charity once you're registered with the Charity Commission, but you're actually a charity if you meet the definition of the Charities Act and you have a constitution which includes a charitable purpose and says you're for the benefit of the community, for example.
And we know from some of the the submissions that we've had back that being registered with the Charities Commission for some of the, and we're, I suppose, looking at smaller charities here, does have its benefits as well. And just so we go back to that part about smaller charities, we heard from about the laws in Scotland. We had a witness session last week. So are you then saying that you think that would be a way that we should go down, the route that Scotland have gone down, or where we're allowing those smaller charities then to register but having less onerous reporting procedures for them?
Yeah, if we were starting, I think if we were starting with charity legislation from scratch, the Scottish legislation would probably be the ideal version. But I understand that as we are with the Charities Act that we have, it may be difficult to change the definition of charity within that to include the definition of the Scottish definition. But to get us out of a hole here, if you like, probably the easiest thing to do is to introduce a de minimis threshold.
Yeah, okay. And then just another question then to do with the appeals period. Again, this is something that has risen within submissions as well, to say that the 42-day appeal period is not long enough. We've heard that from other submissions. And you've then said about a 3-month appeal. Would that be, just for clarification really, in case we need to do any amendments to this bill, are we talking about a 3 calendar month or a 90-day appeal, just for clarification in case we do decide to amend it?
3 calendar months was what we were thinking.
Okay.
Or longer. We're thinking about the time that trustees need to get together and meet. If they receive a letter from the Commission, they need to get together, call a meeting. They may need to actually go and seek legal advice. All of that takes time.
Okay. No, I get that, absolutely. Members, any questions they want to ask Denise? Yeah, Andy?
Yes, Denise, just in terms of the registration threshold, what do you think an appropriate, if you have one, an appropriate threshold would be?
Okay. In our submission to the Independent Review Panel, we set out the suggestion as a de minimis threshold at £20,000. We agreed on that figure because we were thinking of organisations under £20,000 were unlikely to have staff, for example, and we also recognise that there will be many organisations under that figure that actually want to be charities as well, that they get the benefits of being a charity. So it's not a case that every single organisation that our charity that's currently registered under £20,000 would opt to go off the register. That simply wouldn't be the case, because there would be so many that would enjoy the benefits of charity registration.
No worries, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions they want to ask Denise at this stage? No? Okay, members, look, thank you Denise for that. Thank you for your submission. There's plenty of detail in it, and it'll certainly go some way to helping us to informing us on our final report and any amendments we might wish to put down. So thanks, Denise.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, bye bye. Okay. Just looking, have we Aidan Campbell here to do the next briefing session yet? No. Okay, then members, I'm going to move us along again further onto your pack. If you just want to go then to correspondence at agenda item 18. Members, correspondence memo is page 609 of your pack. Can I draw your attention to pages 642 to the Minister's invitation on the 13th of October to a reception for our Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic athletes. I'd ask members who wish to attend this event, please advise the committee team as soon as possible. Members, can I also draw your attention to correspondence from the Finance Committee at page 643. On the 6th of September, the Department of Finance laid a memorandum relating to a proposed LCM in respect of the Westminster Public Sector Pensions and Judicial Offices Bill. The bill provides for reforms of public sector pensions relating to the so-called McLeod judgment. Our members agreed to support the need for the LCM and respond to the Finance Committee in that regard. Members agreed? Yep. Paul, you'll know probably all about that. Yeah. Okay. Members, then can I draw your attention to correspondence also from the Finance Committee on their call for evidence on the defamation bill at page 666. The aim of the bill is to reform the law of defamation in order to ensure that a fair balance is struck between the right to freedom of expression and the protection of reputation. Can I ask if members wish to make a response in support of the aims of the bill to the Finance Committee? That's that first and foremost. Do members want to do that response? Anybody? No, nobody's saying too much on that we want to do a response to that. Paul, what do you think? Should we be doing a response? You've sat in that committee.
Yeah, although it's really only, the committee's only really looking at it now, I suppose. So again, there's an open book on this at the present time. I heard the concerns from individual members in the second reading. I'm not sure whether I'm comfortable enough to suggest that a committee like this should form an opinion.
Okay.
At this stage.
All right. Well, then we'll leave that then for now. Okay, members. I think we have Aidan is in the room, so I'm going to then finish the correspondence there and go back to our next witness session. So just somebody take a note of where we are there, because goodness knows where I'll take us back to. Okay, we're then going to come back to agenda item 7, which is briefing by the Rural Community Network on the Charities Bill. Members, you've been provided with a copy of their briefing paper at page 47 of your back. And then can I just offer a warm welcome to Aidan Campbell. Aidan, you're very welcome and glad to have you here with us today. Can I ask you then to go ahead and brief the committee?
Thanks very much, Chair. Can I just check, is you hearing me okay?
We are indeed, Aidan.
Great, that's brilliant. Thanks very much for the invite to the committee to give evidence this morning on the Charities Bill. I'll say a wee bit about Rural Community Network first. For those that don't know us, our Rural Community Network is a regional voluntary network established in 1981 by local community organisations to articulate the voice of rural communities on issues related to poverty, disadvantage, equality, social exclusion and community development. RCN has over 250 members across rural Northern Ireland. One of our key roles is to provide governance advice and support to our members, and we do that through hosting training courses, workshops, and by providing one-to-one advice to our members. RCN were also a helper group designated by the Charity Commission to support groups going through the charity registration process. Before I start, I suppose a caveat on what I will say is that our evidence is about the issues we want to see the bill addressing and the outcomes we would hope to see for our members, rather than the technicalities of the wording of the bill, because obviously it's quite complicated in terms of just going through the different clauses and wording, so we wouldn't be experts in terms of how legislation is framed by any means. So RCN supports the concept of charity registration and an independent charity commission, as we believe in an up-to-date, comprehensive register of charities that's publicly available, and an independent regulator promotes transparency and increases public confidence in charities. In terms of the bill itself, you have our short briefing in front of you, but I'd highlight, I suppose, the following points. We welcome the intention of the bill to make the majority of decisions taken by Commission staff lawful. Most small charities, especially the ones that we work with in rural communities, are largely run by volunteers. They don't have any staff support, and they would not wish to go through the charity registration process for a second time. We agree that any decision still subject to ongoing legal proceedings should not be subject to the clause, which should protect individuals' rights. RCN believes that the clauses in the bill setting out the power to delegate or the scheme of delegation should allow Commission staff to operate effectively and efficiently, and we hope that this will allow charities to receive timely information and decisions from the Commission. RCN welcomes the power to introduce a registration threshold using regulations. Many smaller charities staffed by volunteers find the charity registration process onerous and needed the support of helper groups to navigate the process. The requirement that the registration process be carried out online was another barrier to older trustees and trustees in rural areas who are unable to access broadband or struggle to access broadband. And the annual reporting process can be onerous for smaller charities and is, in our view, disproportionate regarding the level of risk of inappropriate use of funds raised. RCN's view is that the Department should also issue any detailed exemption regulations for full public consultation, so any issues related to the specifying of charity income or assets can be aired. So that's, Chair, our sort of brief highlights of our submission to the committee evidence session, and if just want to stop there and open up for any questions or discussion.
That's grand, Aidan. Look, thank you, and we really do welcome you being here with us today. We had NICVA in earlier, and I'd asked them the question around smaller charities, and I know you'd said that you support Clause 3 regarding the powers to set a registration threshold. We heard from about the legislation in Scotland at committee last week, and that where all charities were required to register, though they did have different rules around reporting. And smaller charities, it wasn't quite as onerous. Just what would your views be on that? I mean, you'd said that a lot of the people you represent are, that would be smaller and it would be volunteer led. What would your views be on all charities having to be registered, albeit the smaller ones not having to go through the same rigorous form filling as the larger ones?
Well, we give our views to the independent inquiry into charity regulation earlier in the year, and we were suggesting that a de minimis threshold should be brought in, so that the very small charities shouldn't need to register, even if they were below a certain level of income or assets, because in our view, if you have a very small area-based charity, which lots of our members are, doing work in their area, that they're largely raising funds in their own community. They're largely accountable to their own community. They know most of the people in their area. The risk of anything going wrong is quite low. So in our view, there should be a de minimis exception for those very small charities that are run by volunteers. Now, if the committee and the other stakeholders and the department and the minister take the view that all charities should be registered, then if the registration is a one-off process, I suppose people could live with that if they were exempted from the reporting. As Denise was saying earlier, I mean, we have been part of that project as well, supporting groups that were in default on the Charity Commission website in terms of reporting, and trying to bring them back on, give them a bit of support to upload accounts or documents so that they were back up to date on the Charity Commission website. But we found that even like Denise, some of those groups then went back into default again. So in our view, I mean, it seems to be for some of those small charities, the report requirements just seem to be, disproportionate to the level of risk, we think.
No, absolutely, and I do know there are some very small charities out there that are actually, raising funds for very local issues, and it would seem rather onerous to put that level of reporting onto them. Just then, I want to ask you as well. You had mentioned also about the 40-day appeal period. Just talk that out with us, with a rural community and with the charities you represent. How does, that 40-day, 2-day period, why does that not work for you as well?
Well, it's not so much, I suppose when we're thinking of our member groups, lots of them, as I say, are, the vast majority of them have no paid staff. Yeah. They're run by volunteers. Obviously, in most rural community groups, you maybe have a core of 4 or 5 officers on a committee who are the most active people. But even, those are the people that are probably doing the majority of the work in terms of the governance and ensuring meetings are happening. So your chairperson, treasurer, secretary, those are the key roles, I guess, in terms of volunteer charities. But even allowing for that, most of those officers will still not want to be taking decisions except at monthly meetings. And a lot of charities are run, or a lot of small volunteer groups are run on the basis of a monthly meeting. So that's the main decision-making forum that they have. So if you allow maybe correspondence coming in 3 weeks until a charity meets, then if information is coming in, requests from the Charity Commission, so that's the first meeting is maybe 3 weeks later, then officers have to go away, do some more, pull together documentation if they need to see a solicitor. 42 days can go by pretty quickly. So we were suggesting 3 months in terms of giving those smaller voluntary based charities just that bit of extra time to try and respond to the Commission.
No, I think that makes perfect sense, especially as you say with those smaller charities that are maybe only meeting once a month. And if you need to seek legal advice and stuff like that, 42 days certainly doesn't seem like a great amount of time. Members, have you any questions, Andy?
Yeah, Aidan, just very quickly, two questions really. The first one being in relation to the registration threshold, just similar to what I asked NICVA. What do you feel an appropriate threshold would be?
Andy, in our submission to the independent inquiry earlier in the year, we suggested a threshold of income of £10,000 per annum. Because we know certainly from our work with our member groups that lots of our charities are under, they have less than £10,000 income per year. So that was the rationale behind us asking for that. But I guess it's something like that is probably going to need to go out to full public consultation so that all the issues in relation to where a threshold might sit, what level of assets, what level of income is appropriate, and what that means then for the registration and the report requirements. I guess that would probably be our view, that is given a full public hearing. Now I know that's going to probably delay, and that's I suppose our concern as well, is in that this doesn't drag on for years and years, and that charities are given as this can be sort of expedited as quickly as possible. But I think in terms of where it sits, it might be an idea for the department to go out to public consultation on that.
No problem, appreciate that. And just, I'm interested in the part you're saying you obviously support other smaller charities in their sort of annual reporting. Is there any particular aspect that you feel that those organisations are struggling with, or is it just more the internet-based element of it, or is there a particular issue?
Well, some of it is just the broadband issue in rural communities, as we know, is difficult. And we found certainly in lots of rural communities, the age profile of volunteers and officers on charity committees is older. So sometimes they're struggling with that. One of the other things that we found with member groups, new charities that have gone onto the register, is first of all they think that once we're registered that's it. They don't realise that there's a reporting requirement, maybe initially until the Charity Commission contacts them to tell them that they're in default. And I think we've been trying to raise awareness amongst them that it's not, especially these smaller charities, they have the impression that they need audited accounts and a very fancy set of accounts to be able to satisfy. So the requirement, whereas in reality for small charities, I mean, all they really need is their, as long as their accounts have been looked over by someone who's deemed to have the knowledge and experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be accountant if it's a small charity with small income. So it's raising awareness that it's not necessarily audited accounts if you're a small charity. Now we ourselves and NICVA and other organisations in the community and voluntary sector have been trying to reassure groups about that, but it's trying to get that message out there that you don't necessarily need audited accounts as long as they have been signed off by an approved person or someone who's deemed competent. I think is the terminology in the regulations. Yeah, the independent examiner's report in many cases is what they require, just rather than that audit. Yeah. No problem. That's everything from me, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Andy. And Paul?
Yeah, thanks very much for your presentation. And sorry I'm coming to this cold, so these questions might be stupid, but I'll ask them anyway. Given the fact that Clause 3 brings in the ability to bring in regulations later on, once this bill comes into force, where does that leave the charities with regards to Clause 3 and the interim period, the vacuum period, before regulations are brought into play? So at the minute, and then whenever this bill becomes law, what are expected of small charities at the minute with regards to registering and then reporting? Because I see the difference between the both.
Sorry, Paul, I missed it. Your question was, I missed some of that, sorry.
So, Aidan,
Your cut.
with regards to clause 3 and the power, the ability to bring in regulations around a threshold and exemptions, if this bill becomes law next year, as it will, when it gains royal assent, what does the vacuum look like between the bill being law and the ability then to bring in, and the time period before regulations are brought in around threshold and around exemptions? So, sorry, go on ahead.
Go ahead. No, my understanding, Paul, of our reading of the legislation is that when this becomes law, then the department will need to talk to the Commission about bringing in a threshold. Now, how long that will take, I don't know, but I suppose it's how many charities then will, be called forward for registration in that time period, and how long, if then the back and forward between the Commission and the department in terms of setting a scheme for the de minimis threshold, the different thresholds of income and assets, whether or not they decide to go to public consultation on that, then I suppose generally that's 3 months or 12 weeks. Then depending on the amount of consultation responses back, potentially you could be looking at another 9 months longer. But I suppose it could be the back end of next year before any de minimis threshold is set, and those regulations are longer. So that would be my, I suppose, reading of how that would come in, unless it can be put.
I suspect you're being very optimistic there with regards to the regulations being laid. So what does it look like now? What does a small charity have to do now with regards to registration and reporting? Because that will be the status quo, even with this.
Well, at the minute, if you're called forward for charity registration, and you're a small volunteer-led charity, the ones that have been, some of them will be able to deal with that process and they may find it initially daunting, but with a bit of support online, a few telephone calls, back and forward, a few emails, they'll be able to get through that process themselves within, hopefully within about 2 or 3 months, maybe about 3 months. I think that the last one that I was working on myself to support, now that was a couple of years back, because the person who usually does this work in our organisation wasn't available to come to this briefing today, Connor, but that was about a 3-month process back and forward, and it wasn't particularly onerous. I have to say, the Charity Commission are generally, they will work with volunteer-led groups. They will give them extra time if needed, so they are very accommodating and understand the circumstances that volunteer-led groups work with. But I suppose then that's the sort of length of time that it takes in terms of getting registered. In terms of the uploading of documents is not, once groups can be supported to do that, it's keeping that up to date is the issue for a lot of those groups.
Do you know how many charities are called forward per year?
No, I don't have that information off the top of my head. I think there's about 6,500. I think I was looking the other day. I think there's about 6,500 are on the list, are on the register. Sorry, at the moment. Okay. So they're currently registered as it sits. I don't know how many more are to be called. I remember a conversation back at the time the commission was being established and we're bringing forward the first batch of charities. There was a deemed list at that time, and I think the ballpark figure they talked about was 12,000 charities on the deemed list at that stage. Okay. Now, whether or not all those charities were still active, they suspected that lots of them were in name only, had been set up and were no longer, and were had gone dormant. So the expectation would be that, or certainly at that time, the expectation was that some of those charities would be called forward and it would be found that they weren't actually active anymore. and wouldn't be going forward for registration.
Okay, thank you very much.
Grant, thanks, Paul. Okay, no other member. Sorry, Andy wants to come in. Go ahead, Andy.
Aidan, it's clear throughout all your presentation the support provided across the wider sector. Do you feel that the support coming down from the department is adequate to support those smaller charities in terms of funding the organisations such as yourselves to help navigate through the requirements?
Well, Andy, in terms of us being, we're no longer deemed we're no longer a helper group, because there are other groups out there that are doing that role. So we've stopped doing that role, and we had done it voluntarily since the Charity Commission had been established. So there were a sort of group of network support organisations that had been doing the helper group role, but we hadn't been. That was sort of on top of our additional work, or it was additional work on top of what we were doing. Now, we did get some support from the department in terms of that project that Denise was talking about earlier, in terms of supporting small charities who were in default to get their documentation in order. So we were supported for that. But I guess as Denise said in her presentation, just because documents are up on the Charity Commission website and accounts are being uploaded, it doesn't necessarily mean, the Charity Commission isn't necessarily checking that stuff. So there is a paper trail, and there is transparency for members of the public. If they have a concern, they can look up the charity register. They can check what documentation is up there, have latest accounts been uploaded, who the contact people are for that charity, the area of operation, their objects, etc., etc. But I would say that it's obviously the Charity Commission doesn't have the resources, and nor do they pretend that they do, to be able to check the documentation that's coming in from all these thousands of charities every year in terms of uploading accounts. So it's there as a paper trail. But they don't have the resources to check up on all of that information that they're receiving on a yearly basis.
Yeah, no, absolutely appreciate it. And I do know, obviously, as you say, members of the public and funding bodies would quite often go in and check the accounts, the independently examined accounts, and that provides that degree of assurance for them in terms of funding or the wider public transparency and openness around the charities. But I suppose just the key point, do you feel there could be more support for the sector in helping trustees to better understand their role and responsibility? I know there is fantastic work that goes on, but could that be enhanced, do you feel?
Well, I suppose one of the things that we would say is that governance is something that it's probably a boring topic, and it's not very innovative, or it's not like a buzz. Teaching people how to run a charity, teaching them the roles of a chair, a treasurer, a secretary, it's bread and butter stuff. And the thing about it, certainly in terms of volunteer charities and volunteer community groups, is that it's work that needs to be done constantly, because as people have busy lives, people's lives change. What they can do one year, or as people have kids, or start to have older parents maybe that have care needs, then they have to step away from charity boards and do something else. So that idea of succession planning is important, and I suppose it's something that needs, it's ongoing, and it's just something that needs to be done as new people come on to charities, and as new cohorts of people come on to charities all the time, and as new issues come up. Yeah. So to us, it's an ongoing process, this idea of succession planning. And certainly in rural communities, it's something that we're trying to work with to encourage younger people to get involved. Because as I said earlier, there's an older cohort of people involved in charity boards in rural communities. And we're trying to support, some of those people to step away and hand over in a sustainable way to new people in their area, bring new blood on, new ideas. But that ongoing skilling up and ensuring that people have the skills, know what their roles and responsibilities are in terms of running the charity, know what good practice is, share ideas with other charities and network with other charities across Northern Ireland and further afield. We think that's important, and that's bread and butter work that needs to be done and supported.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the roles and responsibilities are quite onerous at times, as I'm sure you're only too familiar. So let's say a charity trustee comes forward. Where would you point them to for that training support?
Well, certainly for our organisation offers support. We can do training with individual boards. So with a whole charity, we can go and do sessions with them around good governance. NICVA certainly do that for their members as well. And other, certainly in rural areas, we have a whole network of rural support networks that offer, they're all charity help or charity commission helper groups, and offer governance support to their members in rural communities. So there are a range of organisations that can offer that support. I suppose it's making sure that we're up to date, that we're offering the support that's, information that's credible and relevant and accessible to people. Because obviously people get motivated to join a charity because they want to get involved. They see a need in their area or in their community, and they want to address it, whether it's with older people, with young children and young people, around the environment, around housing, whatever the need is in their area. People are there are so many good people out there getting involved in trying to make life better in their community, and that's their key motivation. But I suppose the boring part of it, or less, people don't join up to charities or get involved in charities to go to committee meetings, but eventually that's what you find yourself doing the longer you're involved. So that's I suppose as I was saying earlier, that's the sort of bread and butter work, that training that needs to be and renewal of charity boards that needs to be, that's just ongoing work and will be while we have charities and community groups out there doing addressing need in communities.
Totally. Thanks, Aidan, Chair. I know that's slightly outside the scope, but I think it's very important and valid.
That's fair enough. No, thanks, Andy. Okay, no other member has indicated they want to ask anything. So, Aidan, can I thank you for coming in and briefing us today?
Thank you.
Thanks, Aidan.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, members.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, members, we're going to just take your ease for a few moments while we prepare for our next witnesses.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29.
Again. Okay, members, we're going to move to agenda item 8, which is a briefing by the Community Foundation NI on the Charities Bill as well. Members, you've been provided a copy of Community Foundation NI's briefing paper at page 52 of your meeting packs. So can I then welcome Siofra Healy and Shackels to the meeting? These are both very welcome. Siofra, is it yourself that's going to start off?
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. So we're delighted to be invited this morning and really welcome this opportunity. Thank you. Just really briefly, the Community Foundation, we were set up in 1979 really as a result of the number of charities that were forming around that time and the need for independent funding for those in Northern Ireland. And we were formerly known as Northern Ireland Voluntary Trust. And today we have over 70 different funds distributing donations and grants to charities, and some registered, some not, right around Northern Ireland. We've given away about £110 million since we started, and our grants would range between £500 right up to £1 million. So that will give you a flavour of the sort of types of charities that we're working with. So they range right from, a PTA in a local area right up to some of the major national charities. around 1.5 million people would benefit from the work of the foundation every year, and part of our role is around connecting funders with communities. So we're like a vehicle for anybody who wants to support communities. We try to make sure that their funding is impactful and that it gets to the right groups at the right time and in the right place. And that essentially is what we do through our funds. And we have some strategic priority areas, which I'm not going to get into today, because I think they're kind of outside the brief, but we are more than a funder, I suppose is what I want to say. And that's very important to us. Just in terms of the type of charity that we work with, I've said that we work with all charities, but we did a survey of our beneficiaries last June in response to COVID, and of the groups that responded to our survey, 23% of them had an income of less than £10,000. So that will show you, we are working with some of the smallest groups right across Northern Ireland, and 24% of them actually had an income of between 50 and 100,000. So I think we're probably one of the biggest funders dealing with those smaller groups in Northern Ireland. This morning, Dawn and I would like to really just focus on the elements of the Charities Bill that would be relevant to our work. We were very aware that it's quite it will have a much broader remit, but we'll just talk to those elements in the clauses. So in terms of Clause 1, which is retrospectively ratifying the decisions and the orders of the Charity Commission staff, we would fully endorse that for a number of reasons, really. That I suppose registration of charities generally has been a long-standing issue in Northern Ireland, and it really does in the community foundations. You just need to move on, and decisions need to be made. And it can have an impact on some funders who require a beneficiary or a grantee to be registered to receive funds. So that would really set that back years if that decision or that clause wasn't included. But we're also aware that there are about 3,000 charities, I think, still waiting to be registered, and that was mentioned by Frances McCandless in her briefing to you a couple of weeks ago. So that's where we've got that figure from. It also, I suppose, has a very negative impact on any groups applying for funding. So not only the funders who require a charity to be registered, but the groups that are applying for funding. If they can't register, that has an impact on them. And it can lead to just generally a reduction in charitable activity, which isn't easy at the minute. The whole social capital in Northern Ireland, and it's not easy to register as a charity. It's taking too long. All of those issues feed into why we endorse Clause 1. And I suppose one of the main points for us would be around just the trust and confidence in the sector generally, which is relatively high in Northern Ireland. I think it's over 70% compared to other regions in the UK and the Republic of Ireland. And just as a stakeholder in the sector, we would like to see that continue and even grow. And any decisions to have to retrospectively ratify just diminish that trust. And also trust in our commission is really, really important. They're the body that regulate the sector, and it's important that we have trust and confidence in their work. So I'm going to move on to Clause 2, which is about the decisions going forward, and for all the same reasons in Clause 1, we think this makes absolute sense, and that the Charity Commission needs to be able to make decisions, operational decisions. And so we had one question on why Northern Ireland is slightly out of sync with other regions in terms of the delegation scheme, but we don't have a view on it because we don't know why that is, but it's just maybe something for the Commission to consider. Around the decision making as well, I just want to highlight a fantastic initiative that's happening UK-wide around revitalising trusts, which is where funders who are registered trusts and give grants and donations, but are what we term sleepy trusts, are able to be revitalised really through work that is ongoing with community foundations and charity commissions in other regions in the UK. And that's something we haven't been able to progress here because of I guess a number of reasons, the decision-making powers maybe of the Commission, but also the backlog of work that they're dealing with, and we're still at registration stage rather than being able to move on with some of these more progressive initiatives. So just something to consider in your deliberations as well around the bill, that some of those longer-term vital projects need to get moving in Northern Ireland. So on clause 3, which is probably the one that there is most debate about, is the threshold on income and assets. And again, we would be in favour of introducing the legislative powers in Northern Ireland to be able to introduce a threshold. Currently, we're estimating that about 35% of the charities that are formally registered have an annual income of less than £5,000. We're estimating that because of the survey that the Commission did themselves in 2016. It was at 24% at that stage, and we're aware of another survey that NFP Synergy, who are a private research company, did in Northern Ireland in 2017, and at that stage it was around about a third. So, I mean, it kind of tells the story that there are a huge number of very small charities in Northern Ireland. And I guess we're also in favour of the threshold just in terms of the time it's taking for the Commission to register, and the backlog that it's created, and the disproportionate amount of resources that must need to go into this whole area. Whereas the other more strategic issues, then it's a barrier to progressing those. We'd be in favour of either not having to register, or a voluntary registration for smaller groups, or a light touch registration for smaller groups. We, as a funder ourselves, with our own funding, if you like, our own investments, do not require charities to be registered, but we would still continue to do all the due diligence that's required around that with groups that we fund. So some of the funders that work through us, the likes of maybe Garfield Weston or City Group or Nationwide Foundation, do require groups to be registered, but they are giving substantial grants, so you would expect them to look for the groups to be regulated, whereas some of the groups we're funding then are smaller as well, so we wouldn't expect them to be registered. So I think that's really some of the main points that we wanted to make to you today, but really happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. I just want to take you back to something you'd said there in clause 2 about Northern Ireland being out of sync with the rest of the UK and also the Republic of Ireland, and the concerns that might raise. Can you just tell me how that would affect yourselves or others if we are out of sync? Will it pose any major problems for you?
Well, not that we're aware of, other than we know that the delegation scheme is out of sync because that has been highlighted. I would have a question back to the committee that around even the likes of that revitalising trust initiative, that it wouldn't affect something like that. We would have a concern if it would. Those kind of decisions couldn't be taken at the Commission. But no, Dawn, my colleague Dawn might have more to add. But
I think it's just, and part of the arguments are that we want to be seen, there's not necessarily a need for a special case, and that we want to try and fall in line to make sure that there's a more general principle applied across the different jurisdictions. So we would just welcome that we were all brought in line and that there was a common understanding of it across the various jurisdictions.
No, and I suppose that's a question that we as a committee as well, have raised in ourselves, why we're going to be treated differently. And also we will ask that question around the revitalising trusts. We can ask that back of the department to get more clarification on that. Just another quick question, and it's a question I asked our other two witness sessions about the appeal period. You've also queried the 42 days. I know our previous two witnesses here this morning had said that they would think that should be extended to 3 calendar months. Would you be of that opinion as well?
John, would you like to take that?
Yeah, we certainly would be of the opinion that it would need to be of a longer time frame to allow, as the other witnesses have said, to allow the charities to come together and seek legal advice and opinion where required. But we would also actually ask that a similar time period would also be placed on the Charity Commission to be able to respond to those investigations, so that those are time limited too, and not what we have at the moment, where those investigations are going on for some time. So I think it should be a two-way process.
Yeah, you make a very good point there. That charities are expected to respond within a certain amount of time, but certainly many of the bodies that we have within government don't respond in a timely manner, so that certainly is a good point. Members, any questions that they want to ask? Andy, do you want to ask your same question again, just around the thresholds? Or?
Yeah, no, absolutely, I can do, Chair. We'd asked the other two stakeholders in relation to NICVA and Rural Community Network in relation to the registration threshold, and if you had any view on that, what level that should be set at.
Yes, well, we have had some discussion when we were responding to the charity review, and we thought 20,000 would be so very similar to the Rural Community Network. I think they said that to you. I suppose the question as well that comes up would be income and assets, Andy, and whether you consider both or just income. For very small community groups, they may have an asset, like a community hall, but yet have very little income, and I think that's something for you to consider. In general, we would be in favour of including assets, but it's the level of asset as well would be very different to your level of income, if that, or should be different, we reckon, to your level of income.
Yeah, no, that's helpful and certainly worth considering when the department bring forward the regulation if this legislation does go through.
No.
Sure.
Grant, thanks, Andy. Anybody else want to, Paul?
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. You cite the figure of 35% of the 7,500 charities that have less than income of £5,000. Do you have the percentage figures for charities with income of 10,000 and then also 20,000? Or can you direct us to that report that would have that and contain that information?
I can direct you to the NFP Synergy report, Paul. Yes, absolutely, and I'll forward that in to you. That will show you that now. It's 2017, and I think one of the difficulties with this is that you need to analyse the information that the Charity Commission have, and that hasn't really been done. I suppose we've got 3-4 years of accounts now that we can do that. So you will see different figures quoted, but I can certainly direct you to that report that we've.
That would be helpful. That would be helpful just to get the state of play as relevant and as up to date as possible with regards to what we're actually looking at with regards to charities. Can I ask that you raise a very valid point with regards to the exemption and the allowance to voluntarily register or report, even if you are below a threshold. Yes. And I suspect that's important because there may well be requirements in any given funding body that you have to prove that you are registered or a real charity. And that strikes me as something that might well be sensible. So it's voluntarily after a certain threshold or exemption level below.
Yes.
Do you know if you're a lone voice in that regard, or is that sensible and people recognise that throughout the charitable world, or?
I don't know for sure. I know that if you want to be exempt from rates, or if you want to be able to claim back gift aid, for example. All those reasons you do need to be registered as a charity. Some smaller groups, you'll find a lot of their income will be coming from, events and collections and small fundraising activities in local areas, and they would be able to claim back gift aid, for example, on those types of activities. So that would be one reason a group may wish to register, or maybe they've got plans to expand in the future and want to apply for larger sums of money from the likes of trusts and foundations like us, or trusts and foundations maybe outside of Northern Ireland who would look for charities to be registered. So in answer to your question whether we're a lone voice, I can't answer that definitively.
It strikes me.
It
strikes me that we could be in a really awful position if the facility to register wasn't there for charities below a certain threshold.
I think it's partly about, as Siofra has said, about offering the benefits that come with being a charity. We so often hear the downsides, which is the amount of administration bureaucracy attached to it. But as Siofra's outlined, there are a number of benefits. So a voluntary scheme would allow those organisations that feel confident to be able to manage the administration functions of the requirements to be able to do that and access other benefits, which I think we should be better promoting generally anyway.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks, Paul, for that. Okay, no other members have indicated they want to ask anything further. Can I thank both yourselves, both Siofra and Dawn? I had to go and look there at my screen, I couldn't find my names. Thank you for coming in and briefing us today. I really do appreciate that, and we've managed to tease out a few more questions that we need to ask of the department and a few more points that need to be made. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye. Andy?
Sure, just a couple of follow-up points maybe to ask the Charities Commission. One is if they can send us through a blank copy of the required annual monitoring return for charities so that members can better familiarise themselves with that. And also just picking up on Paul's point in relation to obviously if there is that voluntary ability for organisations to register, if that's the route we would go down. But if the Charities Commission have any information from organisations who haven't been able to come forward to get registered within a certain time frame of them highlighting difficulties that they've had in relation to applying for funding, etc., because no doubt they'd be the go-to body to say, look, we would like to be brought forward to register more promptly. I know I've written to them on behalf of organisations in the past, so a better understanding of how many organisations have inquired with the Commission in that regard.
No, I think they're good points, and certainly we'll ask for that information. Okay, members, our next witness session, because we're pretty much very ahead of time this morning, they're not with us at the moment, so I'm going to move you then back again to correspondence. We might as well push on with the other stuff, if I can remember where we are. Yeah, okay. Then members, if we go back to correspondence, can I draw your attention to page 670, and it's an invitation from UCUS to the launch on the 29th of September in the City Hall of a new guide to claiming universal credit. Due to limited numbers, the invitation presently extends to myself, the Vice Chair Kelly, and our clerk. I'm unable to attend, and the clerk is content for another member to use her invitation if needs be. I'm chairing, I have an all-party group that I will be chairing, which is a bit tight for me to get to it. So can I just ask if there's any other member that would be interesting? It's next week. On behalf of the committee, I will check in with Kelly as well to see if she can attend, because I think they're asking for a few words to be said. Isn't that correct too? Yeah, so any other member here that would have capacity to attend that next week, can the please just link in with the committee clerk and let them know? Okay. Yeah, it needs to be done sooner rather than later, isn't that correct? So that can be sent. Okay. Members, anybody want to bring up anything else under correspondence? Nothing? Okay. Then can I move you on to agenda item 19, which is our forward work programme. Members, we're going to go into closed session at the end of our meeting today to discuss that further. Members agreed?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Then agenda item 20 is any other business. Members, any other business they need to highlight with us? Andy?
Yeah, Chair, can I just ask we write to the department in relation to 8C1, which is the application for healthcare costs, dental, optical, etc. When somebody makes an application for universal credit, I'm getting more and more constituents coming to me who have only found out that they needed to make that application for assistance with that after the fact, in which they have thought that they were entitled to that, and then they've been followed up by the department to say actually you've claimed and you didn't have the requisite information in place. So just to better understand the process, what the department are doing to notify individuals that they need to apply for an HC1 and thresholds, etc.
No, I think that would be excellent to get that information, even for ourselves as constituency MLAs, to have that information too, and for that to be passed around everybody. So no, that's fair enough. Anybody else, any other business they want to bring up? No, okay. Members, then, agenda item 21 is date, time and location of our next meeting. So our next meeting will take place next Thursday, the 30th of September, here in room 29 at 9 a.m. And just to remind members, we will be going into closed session after our briefings today. So we'll sort of go into it straight away after briefing. So just to stay with us for that if you can. We have one person in at the minute of our next briefing. So I just propose that we just take a short comfort break while we track down our other two members, okay?
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Okay, members, we're going to move on then to agenda item 9, which is a briefing by officials on departmental development of the Irish language strategy and the Ulster Scots language, heritage and culture strategy. Members, you'll find the papers for this at page 57 of your pack. And then can I welcome to the meeting Maeve Walls, Janet Smyth and Joe Magee. You're all very welcome, and sorry to have brought you forward. We're running a wee bit ahead of time, so it's good that you're able to come in and join us. Maeve, is it yourself that's going to kick off for us? Oh, Maeve, there you are.
Chair, it is. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, others. Can you hear me clearly enough?
Can indeed, yes.
Thank you, and we very much welcome the opportunity to speak to the committee today and to provide an update, as you were asked, on the Irish language and the Ulster Scots language, heritage and culture strategies. I'm accompanied, as you said, Chair, by my colleagues Janet Smyth from the Language Strategies team and by Joe Magee from the Language Operations, Policy and Programme team. Maybe just to take a minute to draw out for you the distinction in their work. The Language Strategies team is responsible for leading on the development and delivery of the language strategies that we're here to speak to you about. Joe's team on the Language Operations, Policy and Programme look after all the operational aspects of language development. These include the North-South Language Body and the work with Force and Gaelic and the Ulster Scots Agency, the Central Translation Hub, the NICVA project, some work around Gaeltacht Quarter Generation, and the joint and the Department's relationship with the British Irish Council. Both language teams sit in Culture Division, which you will know from previous briefings, has responsibility for arts, for museums, libraries, as well as languages and creative industries, and for the policy on architecture and the built environment that were transferred formally from the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure. The committee chair will have received a short briefing paper from us and will be aware that New Decade, New Approach committed to the development of an Irish language strategy and an Ulster Scots language, heritage and culture strategy. And NDNA stated that the principles and practice of citizen and community engagement and co-design would be a key part of their development. NDNA also committed the executive to publishing a timetable for the development and delivery of these strategies, and it made reference to Section 28D of the Northern Ireland Act, referring to the executive and the production of a draft Irish language and Ulster Scots strategy. The Department's former Minister, Caroline Copeland, in the absence of Minister Hargey, agreed to the development of these strategies using the same co-design methodology and approach, which has been adopted by the suite of social inclusion strategies in the Department, and you will be familiar with their development. So we are able to update this morning to say that early preparatory work has commenced in connection with the very early development of both strategies. This has involved the establishment of expert advisory panels, with 2 further groups to be established, again drawing similarities with the suite of social inclusion strategies under development. And those other 2 groups are a co-design group and a cross-departmental working group. Just to mention then, the expert advisory panels chair for both Irish language and Ulster Scots are comprised of, each comprising of 5 representatives drawn from academia and the community sector. To touch briefly on that membership, the Ulster Scots panel comprises of Dr. Frank Ferguson, a director at the Centre for Irish and Scottish Studies at Ulster University, and a researcher and lecturer in Ulster and Scottish culture and literature. And Dr. Ferguson has close association with a variety of Ulster Scots community projects. Dr. David Hume, also a member of the Ulster Scots panel, expert panel, is a local historian, writer and broadcaster with over 30 years experience developing community and heritage projects. He has written extensively on Irish history and formerly served on the Flags, Identity, Culture and Traditions Commission and the Ulster Scots Ministerial Advisory Group. Ms Helen Mark is a BBC broadcaster who will be known to many of you, who has presented locally and nationally for 4 decades, particular focus on Ulster Scots arts and culture, and she chairs and leads, is the lead host of Belfast Tattoo. Mr Ian Crozier, extensive Ulster Scots experience in the public and community sector, and serves on the committee of the Ulster Scots Broadcast Fund, and he is the current chief executive of the Ulster Scots Agency. And finally, Mr Lee Reynolds, political commentator and long-standing advocate of Ulster Scots, who previously worked with the Ulster Scots Heritage Council, served on the Bill of Rights Cultural and Language Working Group, the Ulster Scots Agency Board, and the Ministerial Advisory Group on Ulster Scots, and most recently Special Advisor to Arden Foster as First Minister. The Irish Language Panel, similarly comprising 5 individuals, Jake McShakish, Chief Executive of an organisation called Firstgen in West Belfast, leading work on regeneration in Gaeltacht Quarter there. Janet Muller, Dr. Janet Muller, who has contributed presentations to the European Commission on languages, formerly Chief Executive of Hubble, an NGO for the Irish-speaking community, and an activist within the Irish language community. Professor Malachy O'Neill, Provost of the Magee campus and Professor of Irish at Ulster University, a member of the Irish Language, Literature and Celtic Cultures Committee in the Royal Irish Academy, and the Language Development Forum within Forres, and retains close ties with a variety of Irish language community organisations. Stuart Span, the General Secretary of Common Gaeilge, a prominent Irish language advocacy group, and finally Dr. Gabrielle Maguire, who's a senior tutor in St Mary's University College, playing a key role in the college's Irish medium education. Chair, I thought it would be helpful to just take the committee through the membership of both of those expert advisory panels. I want to mention as well then that Dr. Maguire has served on an extensive list of boards closely involved in Irish medium education and the Irish language sector more generally. The panels have been set a tight timescale for work, again in common with the expert panels on the other social inclusion strategies. They're working to a 12-week programme with the aim of presenting recommendation reports, setting out themes and proposed actions. And we as officials have held introductory meetings with both panels. We've held our first checkpoint meeting with the Irish Language Panel, and the first checkpoint meeting with the Ulster Scots Expert Panel is due to take place over coming days. We hope to be in receipt of the panel's recommendations reports in December of this year, and the expectation is that those reports will be discussed at that point with the co-design group, shared with the Minister and shared with the committee ahead of publication. So we expect that timescale to take us somewhere into January, Chair. If I mention then the other parts of the structure of this very early development work, the co-design group will be made up of a number of stakeholder organisations from across both the Irish language and Ulster Scots language, heritage and culture sectors. The groups will take the recommendation provided by the expert advisory panels, and they in turn will seek views from their respective sectors to further assist the development process. Right now, we are in the process of writing to those organisations, seeking nominations to be represented on the co-design group. It would be premature of me, I think, to share the names of those organisations with you at present, since we are still awaiting confirmation of their willingness to participate. But just as soon as we have that, Chair, we're very happy to update the committee further. What I can say at this point is that I don't think there will be any surprises in terms of the membership of the co-design groups, the organisations to whom we have gone looking for representatives will be well known to you. And then finally, the final part of that co-design machinery, if you like, will be the establishment of cross-departmental working groups, and that will be taken forward over the next time. I make the point, Chair, that whilst DFC has overall responsibility for the development of both strategies, they are cross-cutting and they will require meaningful contributions from across departments. We will keep in touch with the committee as you, Chair, and members will find helpful over the next while. And we're happy to take questions, but I think for now I emphasise that we are in the very early stages of development around the work, and like I say, happy to keep you updated.
Thank you, Maeve, and I know you certainly are at the early stages here, but there does seem to be a range of actions that have gone underway. Just on the issue around the co-design process, and we hear a lot about co-design, and quite often what our view in co-design is maybe is slightly different to actually what it is in practice. And I know you can't go into any great detail around those people that are going to be part of that co-design as yet, and I understand that. But was that co-design work then done through a call for evidence, or it's not a call for evidence, but a call out, or was it by the department recognising or reaching out to the people that they believed in? What way did the co-design groups, what way were they established?
Chair,
or be established?
Chair, if you're content, if I might ask Janet to come in on the back of that question. Janet?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, can indeed. Janet, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Well, we adopted in terms of the co-design approach, Chair, we adopted the same approach that was adopted for the development of the social inclusion strategies, the suite of social inclusion strategies. In relation to that meant that we have established 3 key co-design groups. The first being the expert panel, and as Maeve has alluded to, folks have been chosen in terms of their real expertise in relation to Irish and Ulster Scots. The co-design groups then will be drawn from key stakeholders across the sector, and from that we will also have a cross-departmental working group. So in terms of co-design, it's expert panels that will set the direction in terms of recommendations and key actions, which the co-design groups, i.e. key stakeholders, will have discussions with the expert panel, and they will reach out to people on the ground and within their sector to further discuss those recommendations, themes and actions, and then we will discuss that with a cross-departmental group who will finalise actions. Of course, we'll then look to set up particular focus groups where we would include children and young people and have a focused conversation with children and young people in relation to both of the strategies, and we'll also be reaching out to the councils and the community planning partnerships in relation to taking on board their viewpoint and looking at community need. So in relation to co-design, the process was adopted as per the social inclusion strategies, and I hope to give some reassurance that we intend to comply with NDNA in terms of ensuring that we've got good engagement, good citizen engagement, good communication and consultation right across the piece prior to even going out to public consultation.
No,
Chair,
go ahead.
Sorry. Chair, if I can come in on the back of Janet's remarks on the specifics of your question. I mean, I suppose if I have understood, was an ad placed, was a notice placed looking for inviting people to apply? The short answer to that is no. I think that the answer there is that we were relying our knowledge of and engagement that we've been having over a long period of time with the sectors, and with no intention of excluding and every intention. If there are others who want to bring evidence forward, that opportunities will be great for them to do that.
No, look, that's fair enough. I mean, it certainly sounds that you're pretty confident that that this will reach as far and as wide as possible. I'm glad to see that children and young people are being included in this. I know that recently when we were doing the licensing bill, we had a session with children and young people offline, and they actually flagged up some very interesting issues that actually the Minister then brought forward amendments on, because sometimes it's children and young people will see things very differently to how I suppose people of our age group see things. So it's good that they have been included in that. Just then, with the departmental, the two cross-departmental working groups, what you mean until the evidence is gathered and until the consultations take place, what is there anything that they can be getting on with in the interim? And also, could you give me an idea again? I know you'd mentioned it there, of the timeline around this.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Janet to comment on the timeline. And I think there can be no doubt this is a complex piece of work. It's a sensitive piece of work. Let's acknowledge that. In terms of current timeline, the expectation is that we will see reports from those expert panels, and they are going to be a critical piece of this. And we see those published, we believe, in January. Following that, there will need to be a process of further work, further engagements, preparation of the draft strategy, secure the agreement of the executive to a draft strategy ahead of publication, and all of that is a process that will take some time. So we can't yet be specific about the timescale, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. I know there are lots of sensitivities around this. Members, any questions? We've lost a couple of members here along the road, so we have as well. Nobody has indicated that they want to ask anything further. I suppose then we'll just keep an eye on this, and I know that you'll come back to us again with any updates that you might have, and certainly whenever you do get that list of consultees, that would be useful for the committee to see that at the stage whenever it can be shared. So look, thank you for coming in and briefing the committee today.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, members, I'm just looking to see, do we have our next set of witnesses there? We do, don't we? Yeah, we do. Okay. Members, I'm going to move us on to agenda item 10 then, which is a briefing by NIPSO on PIP and the value of further evidence report. You'll find a copy of the report at page 61 of your welcome pack, or your welcome pack. Of your meeting pack. And can I welcome then to the meeting Margaret Kelly, Michaela McAleer, Laura Proctor and Paula Cunningham. Margaret, how are you? Haven't seen you in a wee while. Good to see you. Do you want to go ahead?
Thanks, Paula. How are you? Hopefully keeping well.
I'm dead on, thank you.
So thank you to the committee for giving us the opportunity to come and talk about my TIP own initiative report. And as the committee will know, that this is the first own initiative report that my office have produced, and I don't need a complaint. So unlike my other work, I don't need a complaint to undertake an own initiative report, but I do need a reasonable suspicion of systemic maladministration. And the reason that the powers were included in my legislation by the Assembly was to allow me to look at those issues that may be of broader and wider concern, and also issues where perhaps more vulnerable people or people who are much further from access to justice and much less willing to complain might need issues addressed but wouldn't have come to my office. So when I undertake any investigation, and this included the PIP investigation, I use the principles of good administration as the yardstick by which to measure the action of a public body. And I think it's actually really important if you want to investigate and measure that people know what is it you're measuring against. And as you will see from the report, those principles are things like being customer focused, getting it right, being fair and proportionate, and being open and transparent and accountable. So I think principles we would all want to live by. The investigation looked really specifically at further evidence in the PIP process. So it didn't look at the whole PIP process, but at the further evidence. And we took 100 cases, and that included 49 cases where complaints had been made, and we looked at them from first phone call right through to appeal or last appeal. And I have members of my investigation team with me today, and I can tell you that we looked at that in absolute detail. And I made an overall finding of systemic maladministration, and I did not do that lightly, and I did it with real consideration. And the reason that I did that was that I saw repeated the same mistakes again and again. And I found that the entire process in relation to how further evidence is used when making a PIP decision is actually characterised by confusion. Those claiming the benefit faced huge uncertainty over who was responsible for providing further evidence, whether or not further evidence had been requested or obtained, and if it was, whether or not it was actually used in the making of the decision. The key findings were that too many people had their PIP claim unfairly rejected and then found themselves having to challenge that, often in the dark and on multiple occasions, without knowing what evidence was actually being used to make the decision. There was huge uncertainty, even sometimes among the department staff, over who was responsible for providing further evidence. And despite the fact that if you look at PIP online or you look to make a PIP application, that further evidence is very high in that process, actually, the 100 cases we looked at, further evidence was only obtained in 35 of them. And the department's figures as a whole show it was really only obtained in a quarter of PIP cases. What that meant was a huge over-reliance on a short face-to-face assessment as the primary and often the only means of making that decision, and often that assessment was 40 minutes. We did have some concern that time pressures in making decisions and incentives potentially acted to inhibit the gathering of further evidence. So while capita assessors got bonuses on the basis of quality audits, it was also included the number of assessments submitted and the time taken as part of the consideration for incentives. Department case managers are the ultimate benefit decision maker, so even though the assessment is outsourced to capita, it is the department case manager who makes the decision. And what we found was that they actually did not routinely question the assessment advice given. They didn't seek clarification on how that assessment decision had come in, and they really failed to consider that advice until a tribunal appeal had been lodged. And then we saw those case managers really begin to pay attention to what had been used in that assessment. Overall, despite the stated importance of further evidence, we found that it was often only at the last stage, when a tribunal appeal was submitted, that the role of that evidence was considered. We did find it disappointing that both the department and capita did not see those weaknesses earlier, and that they tended to rely on quite a simple narrative that decisions were overturned at appeal on the basis of new evidence provided really late in the day by the claimant. But actually we found that that wasn't the case. We actually found that in most cases the evidence was either already on the department system or the details of those who could provide it were on the department system. And finally, just to say that we do recognise that the delivery of PIP is a huge task. And we know that the department have introduced initiatives unique to Northern Ireland, and we welcome that, but there remains much work to be done. The focus needs to shift to getting more decisions right first time. There's a huge cost to the public purse on getting those decisions wrong. We really welcome Minister Hardy's statement following the report, and we welcome the Department's commitment to taking forward our recommendations. My investigation team are meeting with the Department on a monthly basis to look at those recommendations and their implementation, and we expect an action plan from the Department in relation to this in December of this year. But we will continue to monitor and evaluate the implementation, and I will report again, probably the middle of next year, on progress on that. And just also to say to committee, we are just about to close our consultation on our complaints standards rule, which will come before the floor of the Assembly. And that is for us to standardise and simplify complaints. And we see that as a further opportunity to work with the Department to really help them change their complaints process, because we did also find that actually for those people who did complain, they found that a very difficult process, and they did not really find that their complaints were listened to and acted upon in the way that we would have expected. I'm quite happy to take any questions from committee and also members of my investigation team in terms of the detail.
Okay, Margaret, look, thank you for your briefing. It's certainly, the report did make very stark reading, and I mean especially the very bold statement of systemic maladministration, and I absolutely understand when you say that that wasn't taken lightly to write that. I suppose as constituency MLAs, we have seen it over recent years, just how people have been treated and been unfairly treated, and as you had said, unfairly rejected in some of their claims. And again, as constituency MLAs, many of us have represented many of our constituents at appeals and seen just how quickly that appeal overturned a decision that was made by Capita. So it really is, I mean, I think you said it there when you'd said how the Department did not see this earlier, when everybody else, I think, that has been dealing this saw it very early on that this wasn't working. So I suppose just want to just ask you just a couple of questions, and just you'd put there about, or your report says about the manner in which the Department gathers and collates data relating to all aspects of further evidence and leaves you uncertain of the accuracy of decision making. I know over the years, certainly in this committee and when I sat on Health Committee for a number of years, data gathering is not something we do very well in Northern Ireland in general. It worries me greatly, because I don't know sometimes how we decide how we put money into certain areas or certain projects or schemes when we don't have sufficient data. Just to ask just a bit more on, if you could just expand a bit more on that, on the data gathering and how problematic that has been. And then also, you had said there that the Department have said that they're going to undertake your recommendations. Is that all of your recommendations? Have you been given any steer on that as yet? And I would say that definitely, if it's before the end of the mandate, we will most certainly have you back here, giving us an update again. And then just as well, Margaret, we know that the Capita contract has been extended, and again, this might just be a matter of opinion on your part. Do you feel that has been extended just because there was no other option available at this particular time? Because we know that the Minister wants to bring this in-house, and just that would take just a little bit of work to organise that. Just those few questions for now.
Okay, thanks, Paula. So I'm going to deal with the last one, and then I'm going to ask either Laura or Paula to come in and deal with both the data gathering and the recommendations, because they would be more of the detail with me. In terms of the Capita contract, and I do understand it's been extended, and my understanding of that is that there needs to be something put in its place to do those assessments, so that my understanding is that the Minister needed to continue that, as to just take that away and not have anything in its place would be a detriment to people trying to claim that benefit. I think there are issues about, in general, when we outsource assessments, and one of the things that I did on the back of my report was I sent it to all of the ministers and actually drew their attention to the fact that even if you outsource that assessment, the statutory responsibility for the decision making, including how that assessment gets done and the weight that you put on it, continues to rest with the department. And there is a real issue in PIP for me about the weight given to face-to-face assessments. So I think whether that is outsourced or brought in-house, there is a question about what weight do you give to that, and what weight do you give to the evidence of people's medical professionals or their carers, and that if that weight isn't right across all of those, in some respects, whether it's outsourced or in-house, will not solve that. So for me, it is really about, you need to get right which evidence you're using, and obviously if you're outsourcing that, then you need to put more protections in place around that, I would have thought. If I could maybe ask Paula or Laura to come in on the data gathering part, and also how the department are responding in terms of recommendations.
Certainly. Good morning, Chair and Committee. In relation to the data, we did find a number of different areas where we felt there was considerable weakness around the creation of statistics around further evidence gathering itself. So there was anomalies whenever we looked into that, which had to come to light about the actual specifics of the data. And gathering that data about how many further evidence requests were made in cases, what was actually reviewed on that to determine whether or not that was actually working in the system itself. We saw that there was weaknesses. We also felt that although there was, as Margaret had referred to, sort of a narrative around the decision or the reasons for why there was overturn in the decisions, was relied upon that there was often that evidence had been made available at a later point in the system or in the process. We found that actually the analysis of that was very weak as well, and we have made recommendations in and around making sure that that is strengthened as well, because that is rich data that was available to the department to be able to go back and be able to look at themselves and identify whether it was something that could have been reasonably available at the start of the process, or whether it was something that just was not feasible to obtain earlier on. Also the data that was available through the complaints that were made to the department, we felt that wasn't acted upon in that, complainants and MLA individuals are bringing forward concerns that they have in and around the gathering of further evidence in the process and how it was applied. And we felt that wasn't looked upon properly or wasn't robustly enough brought upon. Laura, is there anything else that you want to bring in relation to data gathering?
No, I guess it would be helpful to give sort of specific examples of some of the issues that we saw. So, in terms of the followers described in there, how the department record the reasons for overturn of appeals. When it comes to mandatory reconsideration, they have a very basic database where they record was further evidence provided in mandatory reconsideration and was the decision overturned. Now, there's no further record on what that further evidence is, whether it was relevant, whether it was the reason why the decision was overturned at mandatory reconsideration. So it could have been as simple as somebody sent in a prescription list, which may have had no impact on the reason why it was overturned, but that would have been reported as overturned on the basis of new evidence. So it was really about a lack of any real detail or consideration of the reasons behind the overturns of decisions, which obviously feeds back into the department in terms of learning from it. So that was one of the concerns that we had. In terms of an example of the statistics, we found that CAPA had been basically providing the department with statistics based on the number of requests, which were determined on the number of referrals, but in actual fact, there was sometimes double or triple counted in a case. So, for example, if in one individual case 3 health professionals were being contacted, that within the capital statistics was being counted as 3 cases where further evidence was requested. So it was basically overinflating the figures. And we were concerned that within the capital statistics was being counted as 3 cases where further evidence was requested, so it was basically overinflating the figures, and we were concerned that that hadn't been identified by CAPA or the department to ourselves when they were providing statistics, and we had to go back to them, and obviously the figures actually reduced quite significantly then, where we found that while we had been told it was sort of in and around a high 30%, it was actually in around 25% of cases of further evidence was being requested.
In relation to the recommendations, yes, Margaret had mentioned, we have met with the department, they've said they're plans about their and how they're going about their departmental leads, and because obviously there's crossover with different teams in implementing the recommendations, and we're meeting on a monthly basis as well to talk through. The department has committed to bringing forward looking at all the recommendations, and we've asked them to make sure to make us aware at an early stage if there's any of the recommendations they feel that may present difficulties, and that we can look at and we can work with them in terms of making sure that at least the spirit of the recommendation is met if there needs to be an alternative implementation of it.
No, look, thank you for that. I mean, you will have known through your evidence gathering, and we know certainly as constituency MLAs and MLAs that actually represent people at appeals, the anxiety that the people go through, the fear they go through, and for what, for why. Like, this is just dreadful. This really hits home. And you had said earlier, Margaret, as well, when you were saying about the department did not see this earlier. I mean, how did the department? I mean, did you, in your evidence gathering, can you give a reason why they didn't see it earlier? Was it because of the evidence gathering? What was the reason why that these failures were not picked up earlier, in your opinion, or from your evidence you've gathered?
So I think this comes back to being a learning organisation, and I do take on board the fact that the department, had a huge number, over 200,000 PIP cases to deal with, and I do take on board the size of that task. But actually, given the size of that task, it's really important that you are looking at if something is consistently going wrong. So I think we're up to around 70% of the PIP cases on appeal that are being overturned, and that would seem to me to be an indication that there's something bigger wrong. And I know the President of the Appeals Tribunal had also drawn to the department's attention further evidence and how they were using further evidence, because that is the basis on which many of the appeals are overturned. So I think it goes back to actually being willing to stop, to take a look, to say, why are all these appeals being overturned, and not relying on a narrative that says it's okay, it's just new evidence. I do think it was a failure to really properly consider further evidence and properly consider why so many of those cases are overturned at appeal, and to really look at the evidence. I mean, the evidence was there when we went looking for it, very clearly, and I know the commitment, the department have made a commitment to being a learning organisation, and I really welcome that, but that does mean stopping and really asking those questions. And I think that is what we saw, was that there wasn't that interrogation or that questioning about why this is going wrong, or actually is a 70% overturn on appeal an indication that something may be going wrong.
I mean, I know from experience, especially those that are maybe have a learning disability or are on the spectrum and stuff like that, will not have any detailed medical notes, because they're not medically ill. They're not ill. And I remember a few years ago going with the National Autistic Society to meet with CAPA, because the amount of people that were on the spectrum that were being turned down for PIP was just going through the roof. And it was the sheer lack of understanding of the condition, and because there was that lack of medical evidence to support their claims, it just was unbelievable how this had to be explained to people that were health professionals as well, sitting at the other side of the table. Honestly, this is just, the more I hear, like it's dreadful. It's just absolutely dreadful. Just to ask you then, on just one more question I have, and then I'll bring Mark in. On the level of cost, I was going to ask you about the costing, what that would cost, your recommendations, what that might cost the department. But did you look at the cost this has had? Not just on the emotional side of humans, but financial costs in the amount of appeals, having to pay these independent people to come in and do these appeals. What way is that looking?
So I'm hoping one of the team might have that figure to hand. We did look at the overall cost of appeals. I don't have a figure to hand.
That's okay.
I don't know if anybody else does.
But there was a cost, obviously, yeah.
Oh yes, several millions. Paula, can you remember the cost?
Overall cost, but obviously that is taken into consideration the number of issues, yeah, of appeals, yeah. But in terms of looking at the different areas, I mean, our main focus was on the experience of the individuals that are going through the system as well in terms of it. And the cost is quite really say to make sure to get it right for the first time in terms of the experience as well as the financial. And while individuals may, ultimately end up potentially, hopefully with the right entitlement, they may for a long time obviously go without that entitlement that they need to support them.
No, look, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to bring Mark in at this stage, Mark Durkin. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Margaret and your team there. Thanks for coming in today, but more so thanks for taking on this job. And I think it's fair to say that your reasonable suspicion was well founded, and the report indicates that. It bears it out in its full glory. We all do know the impact that the HIP assessment process has on people and the toll that it's taken on so many people financially to an extent, but even more so in their health and mental well-being. And that's not even to mention the cost of this malfunctioning system to the department and the taxpayer that Mulla was asking around the cost of the appeal. I'm not entirely sure. I think it was over £6 million last year. Of course, not all of those are attributable to error, but I'd say a significant proportion of it is. We've all heard horror stories. Some of us have seen them firsthand as we do try to help our constituents through this system. But I mean, some of the stories are so ridiculous that they verge on the surreal. It's just baffling that this has not only been allowed to continue for so long, but it's been allowed to continue for longer. Therefore, I certainly commend the report in terms of how it has highlighted the flaws in the system. And what's more important is how we rectify those flaws. The Minister has, as you've said, outlined her desire to do so, and we welcome that. But we need to ensure, as a committee, I think that the necessary steps are taken and taken as early as practically possible. While the report has been scathing about capita and there's no surprises in that, it doesn't exactly cover the department in glory either. And I'd maybe ask you to elaborate a wee bit on what more the department could be doing, because I was wondering, might that undermine confidence a bit in the department's ability to deliver this in-house, if and when we get to the stage that they are going to do so. I know you've welcomed the Minister's statement, but have you any view on what might be a reasonable time frame in which we could or should expect the necessary changes that you've outlined or identified to be made?
Thank you, Mark. Just to say, so somebody's gone off and found me the figure, so it's been over 10 million over the last 3 years in appeal costs. So just to give you a sense of that. So we have made a total of 33 recommendations, and I think we are clear that the responsibility for putting those recommendations in place lies with the department, and indeed that there are quite a number of the department's own processes and approaches that need to be changed. So we've looked at things like much more training for the disability assessors, much more, while CAPITA is in place, much more questioning of the assessments that CAPITA give and are not accepting on face value what it is that CAPITA is saying, that the department needs to renew its focus on the importance of further evidence and on good decision making, and that actually case managers in the department must be empowered to actually really question and test the evidence. So the expectation shouldn't be that they just sign off a decision, but they must really demonstrate that they are actually looking at the assessment evidence that's been given them by CAPITA and considering all the other evidence. And we've introduced some very simple things like an electronic tool to actually record the reasons for a PIP decision. So often, as you will know, claimants don't actually even understand the reason why their PIP has been disallowed, and the letters that have been produced by the department don't actually make it clear why. And I did personally read a number of those letters, and I can tell you that it was impossible for me to decipher the reason why someone's benefit had been disallowed. So we've made 33 recommendations. We are working with the department. We do know that they are extensive, and we expect an action plan on those from the department by December. And once we get that action plan, then I am certainly happy to come back to committee and look at those. I expect by the middle of next year to be able to do a public report about how far the department have come in those recommendations and what's been implemented, because I do think it's important when my office comes out with a report like this, and it is a very serious report, and systemic maladministration is not something I take lightly, that not only do I do the report and raise the issue, but I actually follow up in as far as possible and report back on to what extent I can see those recommendations being implemented. So I expect an action plan in December, and happy to speak to committee after that, and then I will do a public report around the middle to autumn of next year, and again happy to speak to committee on that.
Well, I certainly look forward to that, and perhaps even to feeding into that, and that's an opportunity that could or should perhaps be given to us as committee members, if not all MLAs. Just need to pick up on something the chair had says, and I'm not saying that she's wrong, but just in her closing points there, Paula had said something around a lack of medical evidence, and then requests for further evidence. And actually, I think you picked it up from the report as well, is the fact that further evidence is more often than not an actual requirement. And this is down to the fact that the original evidence submitted just hasn't been properly analysed or had due regard paid to it. And it's almost like the request for further evidence is to kind of cover their backs, for want of a better phrase, in terms of the original decision that was completely erroneous.
I mean, we did find, without a doubt, so one of the principles of good administration is getting it right first time, and we did find, which is why we said systemic maladministration, too many of those decisions were not right first time, nor indeed second time, nor third. So even with mandatory reconsideration, those decisions were still wrong, and it was only when someone lodged an appeal tribunal that either the department made a different offer and so the appeal lapsed, or it was overturned at appeal. The difficulty with that is many vulnerable people claim PIP, and they will not have the wherewithal or the stamina. And I know that my team did see that, and we do see that in cases that come to the office, to continue through that process of mandatory reconsideration and again and appeal. So it's definitely for us, it is, the department has not been getting that right first time. And to get that right first time, they need to use that evidence properly at that initial decision-making stage.
Yes, sometimes you do get the impression that it's something of an endurance test to see, and they do hope that the people will just give up the fight or not have the energy or wherewithal to continue it. But no, thank you again for your work on this and your offices. work on it. It's a very impressive document, but it's a very important document and one that we have to ensure that your recommendations are put in place. And I think it's something that we as a committee need to be spending a bit more time on. I know we're going to have officials and Capita have offered to come in as well, but maybe I'll wait for them to give them a face-to-face assessment of their performance.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, thank you for that. No other member has indicated they want to ask a question. Look, thank you so much, Margaret, Michaela, Laura and Paula, for coming in today. And thank you for completing this report. And certainly, Margaret, whenever the action plan is ready, I think we very much would welcome you to come back and update us on that.
Thank you very much, Paula, and I really appreciate the members keeping the issue on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. All right. Bye. Bye-bye. Okay, members, that's committee business finished for today. Can I ask Mark if you'd just stay on? We just have a couple of issues to discuss off air. So thank you, members.
This is the Northern Ireland